Thank you. This is Art Sprue from the Chatham Planning Board. This is a meeting on January 24th, 2022. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chair, and I'll give anyone a minute to notify us right now if you're recording the minute in the meeting. Hearing none, let me proceed. This meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation in accordance with Section 20 of Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 and shall afford adequate alternative means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 290-242-888#, or by joining the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link on the posted agenda on the town's website. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access, and we'll post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with the town policy, the public may speak to any issue, hearing, or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. So in the procedural steps, what I'd like to do is we'll be doing a roll call of all members first. Also, what I'd like to do is ask any citizen non-board members who are participating in this call, if they could identify themselves by name when they're recognized, and if they are not by video, if they're by phone, if they can provide their name and the last 4 digits of the phone number for identification purposes. We'd also ask those who are non-board members to mute their microphone and shut off their video to help us with our meeting. We asked the board members, though, of the planning board to leave their video on. We'll ask at each agenda item appears the applicant or representative to present the application, and then we'll have a board discussion with board members associated with that. And after that, we'll request if there's any citizen or non-board members who would like to make any comments or questions. All the votes that we'll be doing tonight will be by roll call. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll close the meeting via a verbal confirmation and no time adjournment. So the first thing I'd like to do is do a roll call. So Warren Chain, are you present?
Warren Chain, present.
Bob Werschafter, you're present?
Bob Werschafter, present.
Thank you. Bob Dubas, are you present?
Bob Dubas, present.
Thank you. Tom Geoghegan, are you present?
Tom Geoghegan, present.
Roger Griffin, are you present?
Roger Griffin, present.
And Art Sprue, I'm present. Catherine Halpern, our chair, is not present. I am the vice chair, and I'll be presiding over this meeting today. So the first item on the agenda will be the minutes from January 10th, 2022. I'd like to ask if any of the board members have any comments or questions associated with those minutes. Hearing none, I'd like to hear a motion for us to accept these minutes. Do I hear that motion?
I move the motion to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Bob. And second.
Bob Dubas will second.
Thank you very much. All right, so do a roll call vote on this. Warren Chain, do you approve these minutes?
Warren Chain, approve.
Thank you. Bob Werschafter.
Yes.
Bob Dubas, you approve?
Bob Dubas, approve.
Tom Geoghegan, do you approve?
Tom Geoghegan, approve.
Roger Griffin, approve? You approve?
I think I'd have to abstain because I was not there last week.
Okay, that's good. And Art Sprue, I approve. And Catherine is not in attendance. So the first item on the agenda tonight is the review of the draft mandatory revisions to the protective zoning bylaw, section 4B, floodplain district bylaw. I think we have a presentation tonight or a introduction to this topic. Ali from Sharon Holt, is that correct?
Shannon Holst is
Shannon.
actually here, yep, to present this section tonight to the board. But as the board knows, in 2016, annual town meeting passed an amendment to the floodplain bylaw. And tonight, what's in front of you are mandatory revisions that are required to be passed by town meeting. And I will hand it off to Shannon now to go into more in-depth review.
All right, thank you, Allie. Good evening. So my name is Shannon Hulst. I am the Floodplain Specialist for Barnstable County. So I work with Cape Cod Cooperative Extension and Woods Hole Sea Grant, and I help all of the towns with anything related to floodplain management. And so all of the towns are going through these bylaw updates right now. So going to a lot of these planning board meetings. So what these updates are, as Ali said, you all did just update your bylaw in 2016, and Chatham has an exemplary floodplain bylaw. But these are some things that were supposed to be in the bylaw since 1980 when the town joined the program, and they were just missed. And every single town in the state has missed some things. So it's not just Chatham, it's every town doing this. About half the towns have passed them a town meeting already. So you'll get them through soon, hopefully. So what happens, just often questions that come up, if the town doesn't pass these updates, then it threatens the town's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. The town opted into the program in 1980, and what that means is that in exchange for enforcing certain regulations, everyone in town has access to flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. And so that means that it's typically lower cost and better coverage than what's available in the private market. Another benefit is that Chatham participates in what's called the community rating system. So staff work very hard to demonstrate the good floodplain efforts that go on in town and have earned everyone who has a flood insurance policy a discount, just improved from 10% to 15%, pending one final approval, but highly likely to go through. So 15% discount on flood insurance. The other reason that flood insurance is so important is that if someone is located in a floodplain and has a federally backed mortgage, then they are required to carry flood insurance. And the easiest way to do that is through the National Flood Insurance Program. So if these updates were not to pass, anyone who has flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program would lose that flood insurance, and that could jeopardize any mortgages that are dependent on that coverage. So just a few things. These changes are mostly how staff actually handle things on their end. So there are just a few things that change how things happen on the ground. So one is ensuring that there's adequate drainage provided in subdivisions in the floodplain and certain rare flood zones that as of now don't exist in Chatham. Minimizing flood damage in subdivisions. And these are things that Chatham would do anyway, but they need to be codified. And then requiring that any recreational vehicle in the floodplain, so stored either in a yard or parked there for actual camping use, they have to be either elevated and anchored in accordance with the flood zones regulations for foundation and elevation requirements if someone is actually living in there, or they can be on the site for fewer than 180 consecutive days, or be fully licensed and highway ready. So those are the three substantive changes to the bylaws. Otherwise, it's just changes to how staff will handle things. So with that, I'll wrap up my overview, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. I understand from Ali that with these mandatory changes, we really can't really make many, if any, modifications to this. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So this is really more of a procedural thing if we want to retain this coverage.
Correct.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is ask if there's any board members who have any questions or clarifications I'd like to ask of Shannon associated with this program. Okay.
Yeah, yes, all right, I do.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I understand that we have to do this pro forma as mandatory. Are there other actions that we could take in a separate bylaw that would strengthen our resilience and ability to meet future rising sea level?
Yes, there are, and I'm glad that you asked that question. So the county actually has a set of higher standards bylaws prepared for resilience purposes, both for zoning and for wetlands regulations, so for the Conservation Commission. So we would be happy to work with the town once this is complete. Ally can feel free to jump in, but typically what towns decide and what Chatham decided, or what I believe Chatham's decided to do, is to get this through town meeting first, because it is mandatory and you don't want to jeopardize the town's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. And then, yes, look at that separately once this is complete.
Okay, thanks.
Any other board members? Okay. Oh yeah, Warren, I hear your hand. See your hand.
I wasn't really trying to proofread this, but and it may even be inappropriate, but there were a few things that I just tripped over, and I'm not sure if this is the time to bring them up or if this will be proofread before it's put to bed.
I'd have to defer to Ally and Shannon for that.
Thank you. Warren, if you want to go ahead and bring those up now, that would be great. We can go through them. I'm not sure how many there are, but
Well, I just mentioned the few that I happened to trip over because I wasn't going to proofread the whole thing.
Sure. I'm sorry, Warren, before you go ahead, because it is my recommendation at the end of the staff report that because based upon timing for when the warrant closes and then when obviously town meeting is, if we do want to get this to town meeting, we do need to send this to the select board tonight for placement on the warrant.
Do you have the draft in front of you, Ally, so you could
Yes.
see? I'm going to highlight.
Yes, I do.
Okay, paragraph 2C, last line. It starts paving, comma, excavation. See that?
Sorry, where are you? So you're on the first page?
Well, it's paragraph 2, definition,
Page 1.
Yep, page 1, definition C.
page number. So,
I'm sorry. Okay, C.
where it says excavation, I believe you want to say comma after excavation, scratch the word or, and then after drilling operations, you want to put comma. And I think that would take care of the grammar.
Great, thank you.
On, let's see, if that was page 1, I guess, yeah, so it would be page 3, paragraph P is in Papa, start of construction.
Yep.
About halfway down, the line that begins land preparation, such as clearing, excavation, grading. I think you want to say or filling as opposed to or filing.
Thank you.
Those were the two that I don't think there is any other that I tripped over. So
Okay.
that's it. I just have one other question or comment, really. This is amending our previous regulation. And the definition of substantial improvement of 50% of the value of a property seems to me to be awfully high. Because it means that incremental improvements, go out to Stage Island or something down in the floodplain, you're talking about an incremental improvement could, under this definition, could be $5 million. And it would therefore not require that you meet the current building codes for development or something. It's not the time to change that, but I'm just wondering if that was a requirement that it be 50%, that we must accept, or that's just what we had approved previously, so there's no reason to change it now? Or is it actually a legal requirement that that's what it read as?
Ally, would you like me to address that?
Yes, please, Shannon.
Okay. So that is what the state building code mandates. So we cannot change the 50% number. What Chatham does have, however, is and you won't see it in the definitions, but Chatham has a 5-year cumulative substantial improvement. So that 50% goes over 5 years. So the building department tracks that over time so that those improvements are caught more quickly.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful.
Absolutely.
And again, I don't have the building codes that might go along with this, but under development regulations, it's talking about you have to meet the Mass State Building Code. In general, what does that by right give a homeowner the right to do with respect to their property, an existing residence?
Well, there are a lot of things.
But if they wish to have a substantial improvement, or if a developer is building something from scratch, by right, what does that mean elevation-wise? And sort of what I'm getting at is, can you, all of a sudden wipe out everybody's view as a matter of right? Because you have to elevate your house by 20 feet plus 30 feet of elevation to the roof line. Just to help me understand.
Ally, would you like to start that?
Sure. Well, I was just going to say that we also do have Jay Briggs, who's our building commissioner, on the line too, and he might want to address that question. But Shannon, if you want to take a stab at it first, please.
Sure. And Jay, if you would like to address it, feel free to jump in. So the state building code requires, we changed that language. Chatham had a 1 foot of freeboard built into your code, but that is now in conflict with the building code because the building code requires in the highest risk floodplain 2 feet of freeboard. So it's actually become more stringent than the town of Chatham. But the town of Chatham had that requirement decades ago when it was far ahead of the building code, but the building code is finally caught up. So in terms of the elevation, it isn't a blanket amount above the ground. It is dependent on the flood zone that it's in, the expected level of flooding, and it changes based on the shape of the ground and the elevation of the ground and the ground around it and what's around a structure. So it's rare that something would be elevated 20 feet in the air. It isn't impossible, but it's rare. So
Shannon,
it will have to.
Happy to hop in when you're ready.
Okay. All right, Jay. All right. You know what? I'll pass it off to you now then. Go ahead.
All right. Great. Jay Briggs, Building Commissioner. Thanks for having me tonight. So Chatham doesn't allow fill in a floodplain. So it's not like someone could bring in numerous amounts of fill to remove the house from the floodplain and then elevate the house. We allow landscape material up to 2 feet in depth, tapered to existing grade within 10 feet of a foundation. And then they're still mandated to meet the building height requirements. If they're in the floodplain, they'd be required to go no higher than 30 feet from lowest adjacent grade. So although the house could be elevated, it's not going to be propelled exceptionally high because it's in the floodplain, as some other towns on Cape do.
Oh, that's very helpful. As I read it, though, I thought that if there were damage or a substantial improvement, you are required to elevate the structure such that it is above the base flood elevation.
The lowest floor would need to be elevated.
And that's a matter of obligation or a matter of by right, I guess, one or the other, or both.
That would be a
That is-
requirement.
Yeah,
As if it
That's-
falls under substantial improvement and they trigger the 50% threshold, then they would be mandated to elevate the lowest floor, including a basement, to meet base flood elevation plus the freeboard requirement.
And
They
that would for raise the, but by the, if you just took an existing structure and raised it up to whatever the minimum would be above base flood elevation,
That's
then
the
that
way-
would definition raise the peak of the roof by that amount.
They still have to comply with the building height requirement. So it's possible they could get into a situation where they'd have to modify the structure to
Okay,
satisfy both the floodplain elevation requirement and the building height requirement.
very, very helpful. Thank you very much. That's it for me. No other comment.
Hey, that was very, very helpful for clarification. Thank you very much, Shannon and Jay. Any of the other comments from the board? If not, I'll ask if there's any comments from the public, and I appreciate it if you could raise your hand so that I could recognize you. I am not seeing anybody. Ally, do you see any requests for comment?
I do not see any hands.
Okay. Then I think what we can do is, based on your recommendation and your comments, we can vote to transfer. We need to have someone make a motion to vote to refer the attached protective zoning bylaw amendment to the Board of Selectmen for review, be placed on the May 14th, 2022 annual town meeting warrant, and to set the required zoning amendment public hearing for the planning board's February 28th, 2022 public meeting. Do I have a motion for that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, before you go forward.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask the board, I know that I did put February 28th in the board's staff report. However, after looking at the calendar more clearly and then the other zoning amendments that are potentially going to come forward, I wanted to ask tonight if the board would consider holding a special meeting on March 7th, 2022. It would start at 5:30, and that would be for all the.
We need to see if we have the acknowledgement on the board that they can meet at that time. So.
Correct.
So Warren, are you available on March 7th? Was it
That is correct.
March 7th?
Why don't you come back to me? I got to check.
Okay, Bob Wirtschafter?
I vote yes.
No,
Do we have the mo? No.
No, we're just
seventh?
trying to confirm that we can hold the public hearing on the 7th only if you're available, because
I'm
that's not a
available
normal
now.
meeting date. It's a special meeting.
I'm available now. If
Okay.
that far ahead.
Yeah. Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus thinks he'll be here.
Okay, that's good. Tom Gingan?
Tom Gagan, if you can guarantee me I'll be above ground, good.
All right. Roger Griffin,
I'm available.
you're available? Okay.
Yes.
And going back to you, Warren?
Warren Chain, I'm available March 7th.
Okay. And this Art Sprue, I have a CPC meeting, but I'll make sure that I'm going to be available for this. This would be at 5:30. Is that right?
That
Yes,
is correct.
so I'm available too. So we can modify the date I had stated on that vote to March 7th, 2022 for the public hearing. And of course, to make the slight modifications that Warren had requested to the bylaw. Do I hear a motion for that?
So moved, Tom Gagan.
Amen. A second?
Warren Chain.
Roger
I
Griffin, I'll
second.
second the motion. Yep.
Okay, Warren, I'll take your second. All right, I'll take a roll call vote. Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Okay, Bob Werschafter.
We're to have to approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
Thank you. Tom Gigan.
Tom Gagan, approve.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
Thank you. And Art Sprue, I approve. So, thank you very much, Shannon and Jay. Next.
Welcome.
Next agenda item is the West Chatham Neighborhood Center draft bylaw discussion, next steps. I had a discussion, just for board members' purpose, I had a discussion, and if you read Ally's staff report on this, there have been several issues have come up, and she has made a recommendation that is for us procedurally to do this a little bit different. And Ally, I'd like to have you walk the board through what you would recommend for us to consider for this next step.
Thank you. So if you look at my staff report,
We could, board members can discuss that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So in my staff report, we outlined that the board did receive comments from the HVDC, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then we held a public input session on December 13th, 2021 to gain input from the community and boards throughout town on the specific bylaw that is proposed currently, the draft. During those different input sessions, we did, get a number of comments, which I think were very helpful for us in determining how the planning board wants to go forward with the bylaw, and then also what specific changes could potentially be made to the bylaw. And in your staff report is outlined just a few of the main topics that were brought up during those different input sessions, and we tried to group them together into specific topics that we could potentially discuss going forward. So we thought that these really warranted more deeper discussions and further vetting, and potentially to invite different staff experts to come to the planning board to discuss different topics more thoroughly. I think we had discussed that in the past. So my recommendation tonight is just also based upon the timing of town meeting coming up and the Board of Selectmen closing the warrant in the middle of March. I really think it would be good for the planning board to take each topic, or some topics could potentially be grouped together, and really dig into them, hear from staff experts, make changes to the bylaw, and go about it in a really systematic way with that. So it's my recommendation to start this potentially in March. And if the board does want to go this direction, obviously you can, have a discussion about if this is the right path forward. But if the board does want to go this direction, I just look for guidance to see which topic you wanted to discuss first in more detail. If you wanted to put 2 or more topics together to discuss, so I can really start setting it up and we can go through it in more detail. And it would be, how I view it is to have it more of a work session type atmosphere instead of a meeting. So it could be more of a discussion type with the board. So I think that might be a good way to go about it, because these are larger topics within the bylaw that I think really need to be vetted more. So that is my recommendation, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the board has. Oh, and I'm sorry, I just did want to make one last quick comment, is that there are, the Cape Cod Commission is here tonight, but our grant that we received through the DLTA is coming to an end. So we'll be taking it on as town staff going forward, but they are here if we do need them to revise some of the diagrams that we have, because we don't have that capability in-house. And they're obviously here if we need them in general for questions, but at this point, it will really be up to town staff to move it forward.
Thank you, Ally. Okay, so if I'm understanding this, if we take this procedural step the way you're recommending it, this will not be available for May town meeting this at 2022, correct?
That is correct. Just based upon the timing of trying to, that we would have to bring it to the select board, vote to bring it to the select board either tonight or if we had a special meeting before February 14th. I just don't think that, we have all the answers that we need to go forward.
And I think the other thing I had a question on is, are you also looking at these workshop sessions to have maybe 1 or 2 board members present to participate in that? Or because you're not necessarily looking for a quorum of the board, correct?
No, I was hoping that the board, it would be just like a regular meeting. We would notice it as a regular meeting. The public could be, involved and invited, but it would be more of a casual kind of discussion back and forth about these specific topics. And we would invite, staff that are experts. As an example, Dr. Duncanson could come to talk about the water and also our infrastructure when we discuss, density. So I think that could be a good way going forward, but I would love to hear obviously what the board thinks about that suggestion.
Okay, so but logically this would be done at a special meeting then, and not necessarily during a regular business meetings.
That is correct. So hopefully we could, devote it to one of these topics to discuss it further.
Okay. Well, Roger, I see that you have your hand up already, so I'll let you go first on this. You have any comments, questions?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of questions. You talked about the total board being there, and I think I'm assuming, well, we would obviously there are many issues. I think this is a great idea. This is. I was hoping maybe, well, I guess I kind of in a lot of ways have to say that I think this was coming because there's a lot of things that have to be discussed, and I think this is a great way to do it because we have to catch up. There's no doubt about it. And so, are we going to plan on doing this? We can't accomplish this in one meeting. We probably have to sit a couple times.
So, my thought was that we would, take one. So as an example, the district boundaries, we would take that as one work session. If the board wanted to continue it to another meeting, they felt that they hadn't really drilled down enough into it, we could schedule another meeting, but I think that would be on a case-by-case basis after the discussion.
Excellent. Okay, great. I agree. I think it's the right thing, right step. Definitely right step. Good idea.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Well, I'll go through the board on this one if you quickly can give me your input on this, because I think this is an important procedural step that we're sort of asking us to do. I think it makes sense that
Vice Chair Tom
we have this
Gagan.
many questions. This would be sense to do. Did I hear you, Tom? Did you like to speak next on this?
Only that I had my hand raised. If you could recognize it, it would be nice.
Yes, Tom, I'll recognize you now. Please offer your comments.
Yes, along with what Roger says, I think what Ally's suggesting shows a lot of wisdom on the planning staff's part. And I think this is really becoming tradition for this board to not rush into things. This is a very, very important concept. It may actually be a template for other villages within our community. So 110% behind taking not a breath, but certainly going into the detail and having some special meetings with the board, inviting the public. Perhaps they will or will not be able to speak, but it's just far too serious an issue. And I think that when we did this with the ADU, we spent an inordinate amount of time trying to vet the system, trying to understand where its weaknesses potentially were, and come up with a compromise, because that's what this community really wants, is this board to think through these processes. So I do support the efforts to take more time to go through this process. My second comment, also based on what Ally had said, is I would like to talk specifically at the appropriate time this evening, since we have the Cape Cod Commission with us, and before we lose them, on an issue that I have pointed out on several occasions that I don't think has been addressed fully by this meeting, and ask for input, again, at the appropriate moment, from the Cape Cod Commission about the height of buildings under special permit, whether it be in the West Chatham area, a village, or any of the other villages in the future. What was the impact if we allowed for a small incremental increase in height under special conditions and permitting, with a specific reason behind that to implement more affordable, attainable housing? Thank you.
Thank you. Ally, or is that something you want to bring up? Now, Tom has brought this up several times, so before I go through the rest of the board, maybe we should just deal with this one item as an open discussion and then move on with the procedural pieces of it. It's an important one, I think.
So no, I agree, and I do feel that the board has discussed this, numerous times. It might be appropriate to discuss this if the board agrees to do these work sessions during the housing density discussion, because I do feel that we are talking about the height, and then also I know that Warren has talked about the basement as well. So I think that that might be something that we could discuss as a board, as a package during that housing density discussion. And I would be happy to do, some more research about how that can be accomplished if the board does want to go that direction. But if the Cape Cod Commission does want to add anything to that, or if Tom, I didn't answer your question, please let me know.
Tom, you see you have your hand up again.
If I may, please. I think this is an important enough issue. The answer is yes, I have personally beat the heck out of this. One of the things is to have input, if we could, from the Cape Cod Commission as to any research or evidence that they have found in various communities where this has been done, where the height of a building, if there's a conflict between the development and raising 2 to 4 feet, what has that done historically to that community? And secondly, I also would like to, at some point, have Arthur, the board polled as to whether, this makes any sense at all. This could be just me whistling in the dark. And if there's support or there isn't support for vetting this issue, I'd like to have some direction from the board as to how they feel about that issue.
Well, Tom, I think you're getting into the weeds in here, and I think the whole idea of the approach that was being suggested by staff is that we do need to drill down into this. This is one of the important items. The suggestion is let's do this during that component of the workshop. It's because otherwise we're going to be here debating every one of these things, and I'm not open to do that tonight. We can get to this for long periods of time. If we get into the airport-related issues, it's going to draw this out. That's not the intent tonight. It's not the I'm suggesting. I would defer this to the wing. The board agrees that that's the approach that we would like to do on this, and not to get into any of the details of any of the specific items. Ally, do you have anything else to offer?
Just quickly, I could ask the Cape Cod Commission if they would be willing to supply that information for our discussion when we do talk about the housing density.
Okay, so Tom, I know I'm putting you off on this, and it's been
Arthur, Tom Gagan.
Is that going to be acceptable to you?
You're not putting me off. I think we're constantly on this board looking for clarification. I thought that Ally had given a timeline to.
I think my internet got interrupted. Do you hear me at all?
Yep,
can
you're
hear-
here, Art. You're here, Art. We can hear you.
Art, I have no issue with you wanting to put this in a time slot in the future. But what Ally had mentioned, I think I got it correct, is that we have limited time to interface with the Cape Cod Commission. And I'm just looking for input, doesn't have to be tonight. But before we go down this avenue of what I think is a panacea, maybe they have input to say this is the best thing since sliced bread, or this failed. It hasn't worked in other communities. I'd like to have that input.
Okay. Ally and Tom, I apologize, but my internet connection here where I'm located is very poor. I heard almost none of what your comments were. I appreciate it if somebody can give me a quick summary of what that was.
Tom Gagan, it was in support of what you had requested, Arthur.
Okay. All right. All right. So next I see Roger, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, just going back to, I guess, to where we stand, Ally, you basically we're discussing this with us. I mean, you were going to have some bullets or something. Have you identified what things we are going to discuss? That's probably what we should be doing, is taking what is your plan? We're doing this to sit with you guys. I mean, so you tell us what the plan is going to be. That's what I think that's where it should be.
Sure, thank you. So just before I answer that, Art, I believe Channel 18 recommended that if you turn off your video, it might help your connection.
I will do that. Thank you.
Yep. So really what we envision, or what staff envisions kind of going forward, is we would take the district boundaries discussion, housing density, road and abutter setback, the airport, and then other planning board questions that we highlighted there. We would take them to each of these specific work sessions and really bring to the board more information from, what came out at the board level, and then also what came out in the public, and then other boards and commissions that we've gone to. So we'll take all of that and kind of lead the board in a discussion, and the board can ask more specific questions. We can get more information at that point. And like I said, we can invite the staff specialists to these meetings to discuss, and answer the board's questions and the public's questions with more detail. And so that's kind of the process that I see. And, as Tom was saying, I'd be happy to, we'll do more research and on those specific topics, like the height and what other different Cape towns have done. I do have some that are sticking into my head about different height limitations on the Cape. So I do know that other towns have pursued this to increase it, but obviously it's what the board, wants to do. We can bring you the information and you can review it and see if you'd like to go down, those roads.
You're good?
I don't think our leader can see us, so.
Art?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay. Warren, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. First, I think it's a terrific idea to try and have some work sessions and talk through in detail to come up with some conclusions on the part of the board, whether it's one at a time or whether it's a bunch at once, with input that we have available already or can be readily brought by the experts. That said, when I first joined the board here, it was 2.5 years ago. One of the very first things I got handed was our priority list from Catherine, and so that's 2.5 years ago, and it was already kind of 3 years into the development of a zoning for West Chatham Neighborhood Center. I'm reluctant to, essentially admit right now that there's no way that we could get to the annual town meeting this year, because that means it's going to be 2023 before we have a draft to go forward with. And so part of me wants to suggest that, gee, if we assume that we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good in terms of a draft, is there a way to examine what it would take to get all of us the information and the answers and the discussion we need to try and get to the town meeting this year? I certainly am reluctant to postpone it, kick it down the road another year. And you could have a special meeting, sure. But each of us on all of these tough topics have had a lot of information provided to it. It's not adequate, it's not complete, and we don't have definitive recommendations on things like water, for example. But I think it would be important to examine what it would take to get to town meeting this year. Now, if that means that we have, an 8-hour work session, and we sit there with a draft and we talk through these issues and in real time make edits to the draft zoning bylaw that we've got in front of us already, that's great. I mean, I'd rather spend, 2 all-day sessions drafting in real time, and when we get finished, it's done. And is it perfect? Probably not. But is it ever going to be perfect? And I think I'd like to pursue whether that's possible, feasible, desirable from the point of view of the board, rather than effectively kick this down the road to May of 2023. Oh, I would say, Ally, too, on the comment about the basements. In fact, it is covered in the draft, and it's in the use table, which is where there's a footnote which says that basements of residences are permitted, blah, blah, blah. So my comment really would be amended to say, gee, the commercial multi-use buildings as well could have basements for storage and whatever, and that is not covered currently. But at any rate, so that's really, I'm endorsing completely the idea that we dig in and get the information we need. But I'm really reluctant to punch this down the road to May of 23. And I'm ready to go for an all-day work session, draft it in real time, and we end up at the end of the work session or sessions with a draft to go forward.
Thank you, Warren. Ally, can you just go through what our timeline would need to be in order to achieve what Warren is requesting? Because that's a tall order to ask, I believe, based on what I've been understanding that our procedure would need to be for getting this to Maytown meeting.
Sure, of course. So the select board closes the warrant, I believe, I'm just looking at my staff report right now, on March 15th. So we would have to send the select, so I'll just take a step back. The process is that the planning board has to vote to refer the article to the select board for placement on the warrant. And then once we do that, the select board has to send the article back to us. So they have to go to a meeting and vote to send the article back to the planning board so we can begin the public hearing process. In order to set the public hearing, it takes at least 3 weeks of noticing in the Cape Cod Chronicle. It's technically 2 consecutive weeks, but based upon how the Chronicle is, based upon how the Chronicle comes out, we have to have at least 3 weeks in between. So based upon those timelines, we would have to have a special meeting before our February 14th meeting in order to send it to the select board. And even that would be just a little bit, that would be a little tight, but we could potentially do it then. So we would have to have a special meeting before our February 14th meeting at the latest to do this.
But you're suggesting that everything has to be resolved before February 14th.
Correct.
Yeah, including any edits, any input from any public that we want to entertain. That's a tall order, and I think, Warren, that's the reason why staff had suggested this approach. When we tried to rush things through on this, and if we're caught by the public saying that there's certain things that we hadn't scrutinized enough, I would not want to go to the town meeting and look at an embarrassment of us that there is things that are gaps or holes in it that weren't fleshed out sufficiently. When we went with the ADU and we covered as many of the items that were brought up in a fashion that was made sense, that was a successful outcome. So I'm not sure rushing it, as you're suggesting, is going to get us to an actual positive vote, which is the outcome that we're looking for. I'm not looking to finish this just to hurry it through if we can't get a positive vote. And we still need 2/3 on this. Is that correct, Ally?
That is correct. It would need a 2/3 vote at town meeting.
So, I mean, I think we'll ask the rest of the board if this is something that they would prefer to do rather than the staff recommendation. So, but that's a tall order for us to get all of this done, final draft, and then send it over.
Well, don't get me wrong. I don't want to push anything or rush anything. I just am disappointed and reluctant to push this down the road another year. We're going to end up having a developer come in and develop what little land there is left in the West Chatham Neighborhood Center in a way that is not consistent with whatever draft we come up with.
Yeah.
And again, it's I wanted to just explore what it would take in order to get the board the information, including me, on these key issues in a way that could get it to the select board in time. It doesn't sound like it's feasible at all. So if we're stuck with, May.
So you're willing to do
So
sessions in 8 hours each, right? Because I think that's what it's going to take. It's not going to be, there's 4 or 5 major items in there, and that's what it's going to take.
You're forgetting public.
So if the board members aren't willing or don't think that they're going to be available for something like that, then I would say that we're going to have to defer to the way the staff has made the recommendation. So I'll ask the rest of the board members to actually chime in on your thought process. That's what we're talking about here. It's just process. I'm not trying to go one way or another. So, Bob Wershafter, how about?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm really ready to have 2 all-day sessions to pass this quickly. There are an awful lot of other things that we have to do as well. I like the original proposal.
Okay. Bob Dubus, do you have any thoughts?
Unlike the other Bob, I think we should take it one step at a time and get it done, get it right.
Okay. Roger, I saw that you had your hand up before. Do you have any other input based on what Warren had?
No, other than I would like to say we could get it done sooner than later, but I don't think we can. And I think a couple of things. I think right now I look at the plan we have, right, and I don't mean because we've all been working very hard on this, and right now I feel like we have little plastic things, the red hotels and little green little houses that are on a monopoly board, and it doesn't seem to really be making all that much sense yet. And I don't think it would even come close to passing at town meeting. I really don't. I mean, I think there's a lot of holes, not anybody's fault, but again, it's just because it needs that much more time. But yet, as an example, I think Friday I had taken a couple of the seminar, that one of the things that Ally had mentioned. And I was so impressed, I thought to myself that day, and I didn't think we'd be talking tonight about holding off a little bit. And I said, wow. I mean, they made that to the point that if we had that much information and we had it that close to relating to West Chatham Neighborhood Center, we would have nailed it. And we're not even close to be, And I think Ally will tell you, after they said, I was so impressed, I said, whoa, that was great. I love that meeting. You know, that was great summer. We're not there. And that's the way it should be. I mean, we should really be able to feel it. And I think we should be able to sell it. And right now as a board, I think we're trying, but I don't think we even know what it's all about yet. So I don't think, I'd like to say we're ready, but we're not going to be ready. And I think we have to really look at 2023 as the year we'll look back and say, well, maybe we did it a year later, but we did it right. I think that's what we need. There's a lot of issues. We've had a pandemic. We have affordable housing situation that's been the worst in 40 years. And we're trying to fix it over the winter season. I don't think we can. I think it went that long without us fixing it. And it's not our fault. It happened. And I don't think we can do it. I find it very frustrating we can't get it done. We're not ready. We could try to do everything we possibly could, and we can have 3 work sessions every week for 3 weeks. I don't think we'll get it done. I don't think we can. I don't think there's enough time at this point. Sadly, I think we have to wait. I think we have to do what we have to do and get it done next year. Sorry, that's my take.
And for the other board
I'm done.
members, what Roger was referring to was last Thursday, there was a workshop, Community by Design, mostly related with housing. Ally and Roger and I attended. I'm not sure if any of the other board members were attendance in that, but it was a very helpful informational piece. It was I thought it was a step a little bit further from an examples of what would be helpful about how you do it. I think, yeah, and that may be something that we could, Ally, that's available as a video, right? Isn't it? And we could probably share that with the board members.
Yes, I believe they did record it and it will be available. And I would be happy to share as soon as it is.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to get with you, Tom, first before we close out any further discussion by board on this. Do you have any other feedback what Warren had commented or procedural process that we've gone through?
No, Tom Gagan, Arthur, I've already spoke to the issue that I think the staff has planned well. And as I mentioned before, I think this board, as Roger's pointing out and others, that we take these so seriously in terms of these bylaws we put together, that we want to be successful. And if there's even a hint that we rush through to meet some cutoff for a warrant article, I don't think it's in the board's best interest. So as much as I feel the pain of others on the board to do this sooner than later, with all of their best intentions, I think wisdom has to set in, and this board has a tradition of really vetting things well.
Yep. Thank you. And now I'll close out that. I agree with your comments too, Tom, that I think we need to do this right. I do support the recommendation from staff on the process that we go through. It sounds like that's the concurrence from the board. Ellie, is this something that we need to do a vote on, or is just this something that we can put into motion, or what is your recommendation on that?
Sure. I don't think we need to vote. I think that I get the sense from the board that you'd like to take this path going forward. I would like to hear from the board, though, which topics they would like to discuss first, just so I can get those prepared. And I will hopefully come back to the board in March with the first topic that we discussed. But I also don't know, Art, how you want to take it. I do see that we had a few comments from the public with their hands raised, so I'm not sure if you want to take them now or after that discussion.
Actually, it might be a good idea to take some public comments, because then it might accentuate what we think is the first and second priority topics to discuss. Why don't we do that first and then come back to the board? I see two. Brian Ritchie, I think you had your hand up a while ago, and you have it back up again. You'd like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Art. Brian Ritchie, I live in West Chatham, resident. I just asked for a clarification from Ally. Would the work sessions be attended also by people like myself, or would it be closed only to the board? And secondly, would the people like myself be able to give input on each of the different categories that you define, Or would that be input that waits until after you've gone through all the different categories?
So my proposal would be that it would be an open meeting. So it would be, we would want the public to attend and we would urge the public to attend and give comment. That would be my recommendation to the board.
Great, thank you.
And Brian, that's typically how we would hold the open session. The board would do a discussion first, but then we would definitely want to hear from the public so that we can take into account where their issues are, because the town members are the ones that have to vote and approve this. And if there's something that is very objectionable, we would want to figure out what that is and address it before we actually advance this forward. So thank you a lot. Thank you very much for your comment. And I think Rick Levitt, I see your hand up. Do you have any comments about this?
Thank you, Art. I appreciate this. I fully understand Warren Chain's frustration. I've had that frustration for the last decade, maybe a little over a decade. I fully support the staff's recommendation and the idea of really digging into these issues. They are the future of Chatham. They really matter a lot. Yes, there may be over the next year something happening in West Chatham that we don't want to see, but I think what you are doing today and have been doing over the last year and the staff has been doing is excellent. And I fully support the idea. Let's continue talking about this and get it right. As one of your members said, let's feel it and let's sell it to the public. So thank you, Art.
All right, thank you. Ellie, if you said there's a couple of correspondence that came in, I'm having problems with my communication. Your suggestion for me to call in, I'm going to do that now. I'd appreciate it if you could start with presenting some of those correspondence, and that'll give me some time to call in, okay?
Sure. Do you want me to go through the correspondence that we received now? Or I was thinking it might be more appropriate to put the correspondence with each corresponding item when we have the work sessions.
Actually, that's an excellent suggestion. I think
But we
doing that.
Okay, great. We do have Carolyn McClellan is on the is raising her hand. So if you want, she could speak while you're calling in, if that's okay.
Okay, that'd be great. Carolyn, and again, we're talking about the process that the board would do associated with this moving forward with the neighborhood center bylaw. You please speak, Catherine.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm the chair of the Community Housing Partnership, and I just want to say I really appreciate the effort all of you have put into this and the thoughtfulness you have in making sure that you do something that is of quality and really, is well thought out and serves the town well. I am horribly disappointed that we have to wait, but I completely understand. And I just want to thank you all for appreciating that. And for those of you who saw the video that one of the other board members mentioned, that seminar, I go to things like that all the time, and I see these wonderful neighborhoods, all the possibilities that affordable housing can be. And I really want that for our community. So I'm happy that some of you saw it. I hope you all take a chance to watch it. But I want West Chatham to be something we all appreciate. And I'm willing to wait for something. And maybe we could have a special town meeting. I don't know if that would be a possibility or not later on. But either way, I want to get it right and make sure we have community support. And that's something all can be proud of. Thank you very much. I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm not sure if Art is back with us yet. Art, are you here?
Yeah, I think I have to sign off and come back. Hang on.
Ellie, it's Warren again.
Yep, Warren.
And just to go back to your question, which order should we take things in? I guess I'd like to see that we put at the top of the list just the borders of the proposed neighborhood center, because depending on expanding those borders to include the north side of 28 has a significant impact on the density that could be theoretically achieved, on the water utilization, on the sewage effluent, et cetera, and therefore it seems to me appropriate to sort of decide what's the appropriate boundary before we get too specific about pressing experts on the impact of water and sewage and potentially other issues. So that's the one I'd start with.
Great, thank you. Art, are you back yet? Okay, I'm just gonna keep going down the board members. Roger, do you want to weigh in? I think you're muted.
I was listening, other than districts, I didn't write down what the other choices were, or the other steps were.
Sure, so it's, my recommended topics are the district boundaries, the housing density, road and abutter setback, the airport, and then other planning board questions. So that was a discussion on building facade and width, the extra half story, that's where we put that, when affordable housing is provided, whether to require commercial uses in the front 30 feet of the building.
I guess I would probably say that I'd be thinking district boundaries, density, and what was the third one?
Road and abutter setbacks, and then the airport.
Yes, road and abutter setbacks, and then number 4, the airport. That's the order I think we're looking at it.
Great. Art, are you back yet? No? Okay. Cool.
Probably.
I see. Art, are you here? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Tom?
I agree with, excuse me, Tom Gagan. I agree with Warren. I think that we need to talk about the district boundaries first, because there are a lot of issues that hang on that. And you're right, utility use. I also have no real objection to the sequencing which the staff has put together. I see the district boundaries as number 1. There's going to be a lot of questions by the community on housing density, and I think that's a primary one to deal with. Roads and setbacks, roads and abutters. I don't think there's maybe I'm being naive, but I don't think there's a lot of input that the board will have to work on that. And saving the airport to the end of our discussion is going to probably give us, the board, more time to understand how that's coming forward with the Cape Cod Airport Commissioners. They may have documentations or presentations ready to disperse to the public. And that input would be helpful to the board also. So again, I agree, district boundaries should be number 1.
Okay, great. Art, are you back with us yet?
Yes, I am. I've been back. I forgot that I was muted on my phone. I apologize.
Okay. So go ahead.
Did you get through everyone on the board as far as what their suggested priority?
I have not. Warren, Roger, and Tom have all given input, but no one else has yet.
Warren, Roger, and Tom. Okay. Bob Warshafter?
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree that boundaries is number 1, but I think the airport is part of the boundary. So I don't think we really have a boundary solution if we haven't resolved the airport boundaries. So I would not put that at the end. I think that needs to be right up there with the other boundary issues.
Okay. I think the challenge with the boundary piece and the airport is we don't have any definition of what is happening there. And I think if we start with that, we may be scratching our head and saying, well, what are we doing here? Because we don't have any sufficient information. I think some information may be coming. So we may want to leave that as a flexible item to maybe start with one of the others. And as soon as some of that supplemental information comes in, then we can jump in with that as the next urgent one. If that makes sense to you, Bob?
Well, it really doesn't, because it's so overwhelmingly important that anything else that we decide, and then we find out, oh, that we were wrong in assuming what the airport impact was going to be, just seems like we spent a lot of time in the last 2 years planning something that ignored the airport, and that is part of the reason that we're not able to finish. So I don't see us making any headway on this until the airport issue is part of it and resolved to the degree that it can be part of it. So I'm almost of the opinion that we wait on all this, because the airport is going to be such a large impact on this. I think we're spinning our wheels until we get that.
Okay. Allie, do you have some feedback on that?
Sure, yeah. So I think airport discussion, it's less so about when staff can schedule a discussion. It's more so about when the airport commission will forward something to us to view. So I think that we're really waiting at this moment for the airport commission to forward something to us for that larger discussion. So I just kind of wanted to put that in the board's perspective as well.
Oh, okay, thanks. Bob Dubus, your thoughts on the priority?
Bob Dubus, I like the way it's set up. The way it is, the staff did a good job. I think we could work around the airport and until we still have some time left before we could leave around the airport. We could do probably 80% of the district boundaries and work around the airport until they say something. And there's only a few things that are going to be interrupted there. A couple of them are pretty major, but the rest of it we probably could deal with, and then chuck the airport in as soon as they give us some input.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Bob. And Allie, I think I'm sort of thinking the way Bob Dubus is too. I think that your priority makes sense. We have to get through them, and we may have to cycle back after we're done with the series of them. If we don't have sufficient information on the airport, it doesn't mean we can't do some work on the boundaries, but we're going to have to revisit if we start with that as the first priority. So I'm going to sort of leave it to you to digest. I missed a couple of the first few people. If you can digest this and suggest the sequence that and the meeting that dates that we could perhaps start on this whole process. All right.
Sure.
I think there's a couple of more people who have their hands up, Allie. Is that right? I'm seeing on here.
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, okay, Rick, we had you before. Let me go to Elaine Gibbs and ask her if she would like to make some comments about the process that we're talking about.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As it relates to determining what the density is going to be, I assume that actual number would come at the end. In other words, whether it's going to be 12 bedrooms, 20 bedrooms, 32 bedrooms, an acre. Because it seems to me that you can only determine the density after you've done a host of other things, which is look at the number of units you might want to have and how much parking per unit, what that would do in terms of traffic and safety within that corridor, and what the water impact is. So I think it might be starting out with what you would like the density to be, but ultimately that's going to have to potentially change if you see that the water usage or the impact on the environment or the traffic would be unmanageable. Because that's what I see as a concern, is that if you do a maximum build out, you're going to find out that the corridor can't handle it. So, and, you know, is it 1 or 2 cars per unit? Things like that, that I think all have to be taken into consideration, and the amount of water usage based on where we are today, and being that close to a water resource protection district. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elaine. That's a good suggestion. It sort of sounds like we may have to revisit these after we take a first pass on them in order to finalize things, because there's overlap, certainly, as you suggest, and some of the other board members. All right, and I think that is it for the hands that I see raised. Is that right, Ally? You see anything else?
I do not see anything else, no.
Okay, so we can move on to the next agenda item.
Art, before you move on, I just wanted to say, since there are members of the Cape Cod Commission on, I just wanted to say thank you so much for helping us and preparing these drafts and listening to all the comments and presenting. We really are very grateful for all of your help. So thank you.
Yes.
Just wanted to acknowledge
Yes,
them.
I want to thank Chloe and Sarah also.
Thank you. This is Chloe Schaefer, Cape Cod Commission staff, and I did just want to mention that though town staff is taking this forward, certainly we're always here if something should come up, or Ally certainly knows how to get a hold of us if there is a question that we can assist with. So thank you.
All right. All right, so moving to the next agenda item, this is review draft revisions to protective zoning bylaw section 7B19 accessory dwelling unit. So this one, staff has made a recommendation based on what they heard. And Ally, I think you were going to summarize those 2 items of what was in the packet and what you would like the board to do, because this one is one that the board mentioned that they felt it was urgent and that we could do first and get it done with a vote tonight so that we could advance this to the May town meeting, correct? And that's the process that we're hoping to do tonight.
That is correct. At the last board meeting, when the board discussed potential different zoning amendments that had to do related to housing, we felt that we could potentially make some changes to the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, because the board had done so much research in the past and we're all very familiar with the different topics. So we thought that we could make some changes that would make it more usable. Because we found that potentially the bylaw now is a little bit too restrictive. We did include for data on permitted ADUs, we did include that in your staff report. It does show that 3 ADUs have been approved. They were all by special permit. There was an additional ADU application that was submitted as a special permit to the Zoning Board of Appeals. However, the owner of the property was a seasonal resident, not year-round, so that was withdrawn. And so just to take a step back, as the board knows, in 2019, annual town meeting did approve the ADU bylaw that the board had worked on for many years at that point. And we did make a pledge to town meeting at that point that we would review all of the information, all of the applications that came in all of the data that came in during those few years and come back and really look through that, dig through that, and see if we could make any changes, whether it be that we needed to make it more restrictive or less restrictive. And so I think the data really bears out that we can make a few changes to the bylaw to hopefully encourage some more applications to come in. Whichever changes that the board does, want to make, I just want to point out, still have that cap. We're not proposing to change the cap of how many could be approved each year. So I just wanted to put that out in the forefront so that the board knows that that will not change, or it could change if the board wanted to, but we're not making that recommendation right now. But the first one, and as I was going through the staff report, it looks like some of the print came out a little funky. So I'm actually going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see that?
I can see that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to go quickly through. I'm making 2 recommendations tonight to the planning board for potential changes to the draft bylaw. So the first one is in the use and dimensional requirements. So right now, we are requiring that if you're going to apply for an ADU, in order to apply for an ADU, the homeowner has to be a year-round resident and they have to rent to a year-round resident. We have received a recommendation from the Chatham Community Housing Partnership that could potentially be changed. And so in front of you is wording tonight to change it so that it would allow seasonal residents to rent out an ADU to year-round residents. So the ADU would still be for year-round residents. It would just open up who could apply to build an ADU to seasonal residents. And so that is the wording that is first proposed here. And I'll just kind of go through it very quickly for the board. So it would be in addition, it would say either the ADU or the principal dwelling shall be leased for a minimum of 12 consecutive months with no subletting to occur. Both units are prohibited from any use as rental units on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis, including but not limited to seasonal rental and rental through vacation services and websites. Rental of said unit shall not be used for boarding or lodging or other commercial use. No occupancy of said rental unit is permitted other than by lease for a minimum of 12 consecutive months or other conditions as stated. So that would be the change. There would also have to be a change to the monitoring section of the bylaw. Right now, we require that a notarized affidavit is submitted to say that the residents that the resident has to be living there year round, and so that would obviously be removed. So that is the first recommendation and bylaw change. And then the second one is potentially to consider circumstances to revise the bylaw to allow more by right applications. So right now, in the bylaw, if you have a non-conforming lot in any way, you have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals through the special permit process. So the second recommendation is to remove that requirement and basically say that if an ADU is within the structure, it could be done by right. However, we're still keeping the section in there. The proposal is to still keep the section in there that if you have a detached ADU, it would still need to go through the special permit process. However, we're hoping to allow people to apply for ADUs that are inside the structure, but on the by right basis. So they don't have to go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals with the extra expense that incurs. So we thought that could potentially allow more applications to come in. So those are the 2 recommendations that we have, but I would be happy to obviously answer any questions, discuss it further. And I would just love to know what how the board thinks about this.
Okay, thank you, Ally, for that summary. So these were based on the recommendations by the Chatham Community Housing Partnership, isn't that right? Last month?
That is correct. So the partnership did recommend allowing seasonal homeowners to be able to apply for and receive an ADU. Staff is recommending an additional amendment to the bylaw to allow ADUs that are internal inside a house to be allowed to be approved by right instead of going to the special permit. But again, I just did want to point out that that cap that we have already existing in the bylaw of how many can be approved per year would still exist. So we're not proposing, staff is not proposing at this point to remove the cap, but we feel that with these changes, we could potentially get more applications or more applicants to apply. Because as of right now, we've only approved 3 applications by special permit since 2019.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to seek some comments from the board first. I think Tom Gagan, you have your first one to put your hand up, so I'd like to hear from you.
Thanks, Art. Tom Gagan. I have 2 comments. I certainly think that the number of units that we would put a cap on makes sense because we're not anywhere near that. And perhaps with these minor changes, we might encourage a couple more units per year to apply. So I'm all in favor of the wording. I do have one issue, having been in a consulting situation for too many years. On page 3 of 5, under number 5, monitoring, at the top of the second paragraph says the property owner shall be required to file. And then it says in red, a copy of the lease agreement. I have no issue with that, but I think this board and the planning staff, or certainly this board, does not want to make available to the public the prioritizing proprietary information that is often found within a lease. The lease needs to be signed and executed. I don't think it's our interest to know what an individual ADU is renting for. And I would ask for comments about whether that kind of information within the lease has to be included in any application. Thank you.
Okay.
Art, if you just wanted, if I could just make a quick comment.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So we did just keep the requirement in there for a lease. So that was in the current bylaw now, but I would be happy to hear board discussion about maybe changing it to an affidavit instead of a lease.
Tom Gagan.
Yeah, Tom, go right ahead.
Thank you. I have no issue with the lease, with an fully executed lease. That's not the issue. The issue is now or in the future, I don't want something coming back to us that is going to be unfavorable to the ADUs. I can see the handwriting on the wall. And I think that when someone enters into a lease, which is a contract, I think there's aspects of that contract between the 2 parties, which is personal and private. I don't think that eliminating the numbers that are generated by a rental are of concern on an ADU. That's my only issue. Doesn't have to be an affidavit. I like us to have the town to have a very good handle through the building and commissioner that this is a valid lease. It's executed properly. Whether they choose to record the lease or not is, again, another issue for the lessee and lessor. But we received, where this is coming from is we received a lease on one of the properties that we reviewed relatively recently. And as I read through it, I just found that there was information in there that was not pertinent to the board making a decision about that address of that property. That's my point, is that I have leases. I have clients that have leases, and very likely it can be a detriment to fair market trade and the capitalism of the idea that I have a place, and I don't see why it has to be a public document. The numbers don't have to be in the public domain. That's my long and short of it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Warren, yeah, if you could offer your comments on this topic.
Yeah, this is Warren Chain. More than happy. Thank you for calling on me. This whole topic is new to me, so I have to admit that I have not given it enough. I don't have enough facts to have a definitive opinion, but I have two comments. One is that I support the idea of seasonal owners being able to have an ADU for all the reasons that are spelled out in staff report and by those that have looked at the impact of our ADU bylaw already. It does seem to me, however, that that if you are permitting seasonal residents to have an ADU, that it makes sense to have the ADU be the unit that must be rented year-round. The intent is to try and provide some lower cost, if not affordable, housing, and to have an ADU that generates some cash flow, but be able to rent out the main house, to rent out the main house and live in the ADU is not going to achieve our objective. So that's a gut reaction without a definitive opinion as to where I come out on the issue. But it seems to me we ought to consider having a requirement that the principal residence be remain the purview of the seasonal owner, and the ADU has to be the one that is rented. And a little bit related to that, it does seem to me that given the situations which we've all seen where large houses on non-conforming lots in Chatham are taken over and are demolished and rebuilt such that anything goes as long as it's no more deleterious to the neighborhood than what was there because it's non-conforming. So I have just an area of concern as to whether there ought to be any sort of a restriction on what can be built or rebuilt with respect to an ADU if in fact a principal residence is in fact taken over or proposed for demolition. I mean, what I'm seeing is we take a nice modest house that has an ADU, the change of owner, the new owner bulldozes it, builds another mega mansion of 8,000 square feet, and the ADU also becomes a mini mega mansion, which isn't the objective here either. And whether there should be any restriction upon what you may do with respect to building or rebuilding an ADU upon change of ownership or upon a special permit being requested for the principal residence. But that's just an observation on my part. I don't have enough information to have a definitive opinion. But those are the only comments I have. I basically support the concept of having a seasonal owner have the right to have an ADU.
Warren, I think some of the things that you brought up would go far beyond what Ally and the commission have been recommending on this. Drills into other issues outside of things that were even considered originally on it. Ally, can you fill in? You had your hand up. Do you want to respond to this also, Warren's comments?
Yes, I just quickly want to respond, and I can share my screen just very quickly because we did consider what Warren. Sorry, I just accidentally muted myself. We did consider what Warren had discussed about potential rentals. So let me just share my screen because we did have an internal discussion about this because we wanted to close that loophole. So if you look at the wording that is proposed, we included both units are prohibited from any use as rental units on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis, including but not limited to seasonal rental and rental through vacation rental services and websites. So we wanted to specifically say that you can't live in your ADU year-round and have that be your year-round residence and rent out your main dwelling on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis. And so we thought that by adding that both units are prohibited from any use as rental units on a monthly, weekly, or daily basis, that would tie up that loose end that Warren was talking about. And I just wanted to also say in the current bylaw right now, an ADU, it states specifically an ADU shall contain no more than 2 bedrooms and contain no more than 900 square feet of habitable space. And so that limits the size of the ADU, so the ADU can't be a McMansion like you had said. So I just wanted to point that out, and I hope that answered your question.
Well, yes, it does, but it certainly leaves open the opportunity for a seasonal resident to live in their ADU and rent out the main residence, and that doesn't get additional lower cost housing. That's all.
Sorry, I'm just.
I don't know that that's the case.
Yeah.
The main unit would have to be less than 950 square feet. I don't know how that can happen based on the revisions that Ally has just pointed out.
So, Art, can I jump in here?
Please, I think any clarification will help.
When we did this, we had a little model of the family growing through the property. And if you remember that the family was had the ADU as a rent out. And then when the kids moved away, the family moved into the ADU and rented out the house to another family. There was never an intention that this had to be affordable. It needed to be year-round housing is the most important thing we're looking for here. I think there is a need for housing that's more than 900 square feet for full-time residents with families. So I think it if we go back to our original intent, it was to make it so a homeowner could live in their property for the entire, as long as they could, and make some of their property available for someone else to live there. So I really don't think, and you weren't part of that, Warren, but that was clearly an intent that the ADU, the renter would shift between the two units.
You're right. I recall that now. And Ally, if I'm reading the language that you have in here, you're not discounting the main house being rented for the whole year. It can't be used for a seasonal rental or short-term rental. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, that is correct. So
okay,
yeah.
So what Bob Wirtschafter just described was still viable, provided that it was leased out for a long period of time, more than a monthly basis.
Mm-hmm.
Am I still connected?
Yeah,
Yep.
and I take your information under advisement. And again, I was not part of the overall discussion. I have always heard this talked about as the ADUs were a way to provide lower cost housing. Now, it necessarily, if you have a family growing through a site, that's a whole different discussion. And my observation only was that unless you require that the principal dwelling be the residence and require that the ADU be the rental, then the assumption is that the ADU is going to be smaller, obviously, than the principal residence, and therefore likely to cost less to rent, and therefore provide lower cost housing. So I was essentially observing that what I thought was one of the principal selling points of the ADU bylaw is not met if you do not require the ADU to be rented or be the rental unit. Again, I'm not sure where I come out. I think it's fine as written. It is not an oversight. It says what the drafters and the ones who have researched this intend. So that's fine.
Okay, thanks. Bob, you have your hand raised. Is this Bob Dubus or Bob Werschafter?
Oh, it's Bob Werschafter.
Thanks. Go ahead.
I have spoken, so I can take my hand down.
Okay, good. I'd like to go to the rest of the board members first, and then we can loop back. So, Bob Dubus, would you like to offer some comments on this topic?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Bob, the other Bob, on when we did the ADUs. Like you said, the family could use the ADU to gain a little bit of support, and then as they get older, one partner passes on, that the other remaining one could move into the smaller ADU and rent the bigger house to maintain the standard of living that they were used to. And I know that was clearly our intent. It was market value. We never said it was supposed to be moderate income. It was supposed to be, we were hoping it would be moderate, but we always claimed, if you look back in the records, that it was market value, for whatever that means. And I'm in favor of the changes that are proposed. The other thing is, I'm also along with Tom Gagan about there should be no monetary record shown to the outside of the two people that it belongs to. I'm in favor of showing the contract, but I don't believe that any monetary value should be presented to anybody else but the two that are involved in it. Thank you.
Art, are you still here?
Art. I think we lost Art, but I'm happy to finish up my statement if.
Please, Bob, go ahead.
Okay, so I totally agree with the comment that about not having financial information presented, and that's easily solved with a black magic marker. I think that we can redact that information and still require a lease. I do want to. This is probably it is beyond what we're trying to do today, but it occurred to me when you gave your list of possible solutions for additional housing, it occurred to me that one of the ones that wasn't in the list was rent subsidies. And I really think that the town needs to explore the idea of rent subsidies rather than trying to build houses that are dedicated to affordable. It's easier to provide that money to this house in this situation where that beautiful house that would be serving a family of 5 or 6 is available, but is at market rate. All we would need to do to make that affordable would be to provide a small subsidy to bring that to the affordable level. So I want us to put that on our list of possible things to do, Ally, in terms of both ADUs and regular rentals. I don't know that it would take that much money to convince me, if I had a property, to get a family to live in it full time at maybe the same income as to rent it out 12 weeks in the summer with all the damage and all the headaches that go. I don't think it actually would take that much money to convince people to rent them for a year under those circumstances. So I think we need to look at that more. Anyway, otherwise, I think the changes that we have here are worth putting on the warrant for this year. Again, I'd say let's do it and revisit it in 2 years and see whether we need to make more changes 2 years from now.
All right, thanks, Bob. I'm back. I'd like to just have Roger Griffin offer his comments, and then I'll circle back to you, Tom.
Okay.
Roger?
No, again, like Warren, I was not here when we were not on the board when we did the ADUs. I see that could we have 2 bedrooms or is it just all 1 bedrooms? Just curious. I didn't pull again. I didn't have time to pull out all the paperwork.
Sure. So for the ADU, in the bylaw, it says the ADU shall contain no more than 2 bedrooms and contain no more than 900 square feet of habitable space.
Okay. No, it's pretty straightforward. The only thing I had noticed, and this is just with they're all the ones that are approved so far are detached, and 3 of them were the one that was drawn. I saw they withdrew the ADU, but obviously it was built. The only thing I had noticed, and this is a personal comment, I'm the fastidious type of guy that doesn't even like weeds in his lawn. I just was disappointed. I guess I was concerned that a couple of them, if they were across the street from where I was, I guess it changed the landscape. I guess I thought it was a little bit disheveled looking, and that's a personal comment. I probably shouldn't even say this, but if we have a couple of the wrong ADUs, we're going to have it anyway, and we'll be hearing about it. But there were a couple that one of them I don't know, it was a little bit too much going on, and I guess if I was across the street, I was a neighbor, it would be approved. I guess you could do it. I guess your neighbors can be different. And 2 of them I really was kind of disappointed to change the landscape of the neighborhood, and one was just I don't know, it was disheveled looking. That's just a comment. I probably shouldn't say it, but hey, what the heck? I mean, if we had a problem with an ADU, we'd be saying it anyway. Just was a little bit disappointed that maybe the people that did do it didn't probably get it together. It was kind of, hey, the addresses, you can take a look. But other than that, I guess I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Ally, you wanted to further comment?
Yeah, just very quickly. So in the proposal tonight, if you had a detached ADU structure, which all of these, the ones that have been approved were detached, it would still require a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I just wanted to make that comment that it would still go through a public hearing process. If it was a detached structure, that could potentially change the landscape. But the proposal tonight is that if an ADU is internal inside the house, regardless if it's a conforming or non-conforming lot, it would be by right. So I just wanted to make that distinction that detached, we're still recommending it go through special permit process, but internal, that would be a change to by right.
Okay, thank you. And this for my comments, I agree somewhat with what Tom has said earlier on when this first came out, is that we should revisit this after about 2 years, 3 years or so. And I think this was an appropriate timeline for us to revisit certain things. I think 3 applications in that time period is not nearly enough of what we were hoping for and expecting as part of this overall bylaw change. I think this incremental step here is a good one. It's sound. It doesn't put the major burden. I don't think this is going to go to our cap by any means, which could be a concern if we're going before May town meeting. So I'm in support of the recommendations that were made and the language changes that are here. If there's no more comments by the board, I'd like to solicit, I believe there's 2 hands up from the public, and I'd like to call on
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Bob Dewis. I would like to compliment on the other Bob about bringing up the subsidy question. That is probably a better way, as he put it, to be able for some people to afford an apartment, ADU rather, in this town, and could gather a lot more energy if the town had a subsidy program, which I believe they still do. I'm not sure or not if they have it or not, but I thought they did have one at one time. So just kick that in there. Thank you.
I think that's a good suggestion too, Bob. All right, so Lynn, I would like to ask you if you can offer your comments on this bylaw change.
Certainly. First of all, thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow planning board members. I am very happy that Ally has brought this to you. Letting people that have a house and want to offer a room or maybe redo their basement and letting them do that by right, I think is going to be very important and very helpful. Since this pandemic, I'm sure maybe even you yourselves have said, you know, there's no way I'm going into a nursing home. Or you know a neighbor who said the same thing. And if they're capable of renting out a room to someone who could be a CNA or maybe renovate their basement and bring in a family, that's going to keep them home. And to deprive them of the opportunity to do that by right, I think could be problematic. Now, as far as seasonals are concerned, I think the opportunity for a seasonal resident to offer, let's say, an apartment over their garage would give them an opportunity to feel like they were more part of our conversation, that they had skin in the game. And I think if we put it to them that way, I think they're going to be very, not maybe roll over and say, oh, we've got 40 to go for, but I think they will probably want to participate in some of that. As far as the comment that Mr. Geoghegan made, yeah, the cap certainly makes sense if we pass these things at town meeting to see what the taste is. And if we flatten out that cap in 6 months, then maybe we need to open it. But I think for now, keeping the cap where it is makes sense. Also, your comments on monitoring make sense. And I think with Ally, I am a member of the partnership. With Ally, we can work through some of those things and make it more of a living document, if you wish. And just so you know, as far as seasonal is concerned, the Housing Assistance Corporation is working with First Citizens, Cape Cod 5, and the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod on making financial packages available to make ADUs across the Cape. And the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod is the only one who is willing to has a special program that's for year-rounders and seasonals. The other 2 banks are saying, no, 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 you can deal with our regular financial products. So I just wanted to put that out there for you so that you would know what's going on. Bob, I don't know your last name, but you have guest next to your name. Your point about enough money to a seasonal to rent their house year round rather than 12 weeks a month. I think that's great, but I will tell you that I have spoken to many people that do rent their house out for the summer. And I've said, what would it take for you to rent that house out year round? And much to my surprise, you know what they said? Well, wait a minute, where am I going to go for the summer? So I think we have to recognize that there is a group of people that feel a real pull to their house during the summertime, and no matter what, are not going to give it up. So I just wanted to give you guys some insight there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments and support too. I think Lane Gibbs, you have your hand up. Do you want to offer some of your comments?
Yes, thank you. I don't have any problem with these changes, but I do have a problem with the conversation about not wanting to know what rentals are being charged. My institutional memory of how this evolved is quite different than what I'm hearing here tonight. It was a two-pronged proposal and what got passed at town meeting. One was to permit people to age in place so that they could go through the stages of their lives and eventually move into the ADU and their kids could live in the main house or whatever. The second was to, and this phrase is what got documented and I heard for the first time, affordable housing with a small a. That's what it was sold on at town meeting, that the town was told that these ADUs were going to be used to provide housing in the much needed demographic. And now what I'm hearing you say tonight is we don't even want to know what's being charged. And one of the problems I had with the way the ADU was presented is under the monitoring, because there is no monitoring. So if you now don't want to know that somebody's maybe charging $3,500 a month for an apartment, which is not going to help the people we purported to help, and there is really no monitoring, so you're not going to know if that is being rented out on a monthly or 6-month basis, because people come and go, neighbors are not going to say anything. And I would think you would want to know if the program is working, so that you would say, well, yes, that's being rented for $1,800 a month. That makes sense. And then you find out that no, it was being rented for $3,500 a month. So I think it's a slippery slope when you say you don't want to know anymore what is being charged. I think one person said it should be market value, but he was not on the committee. He was a member of the public. We were sold on the basis that this is for affordable housing for the people who need it most. And I think it's a slippery slope if you now say you really don't want to know. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Bob Werschafter, I see you put your hand up. Did you want to respond to this?
Yeah, my suggestion that we black out, that Ally black out the information on cost, it was not that we wouldn't get it. It was we would not release it. I think there's a big difference between Ally obtaining a full lease and then blacking out the information if it were to be made it all public. So I don't really think that we have said that we don't care what the prices are, but at the same time, there is a need for housing that of all kinds of families that year round can live here. Now, I don't. Obviously, if you're going to charge $3,500 a month, you're not going to necessarily be renting it to a working family, and that would be an issue. But somebody is living in the other house, the other portion of that house, who probably couldn't afford to stay in that house otherwise. So I don't know how you think we could possibly set this up to only be affordable unless we did what I suggested, which is when those situations are that the rent is $3,500, if there was a fund that people could tap into so that we could then support the families that we really want to live here.
Well, I guess Mr. Gagins said that the price would only be known between the two people. No mention was made that the town would know about that. I don't personally need to know what it is, but I certainly think that the town should know if these ADUs are being built with a lot of waivers and exceptions made, that the people building them should not be making a windfall and ending up with a guest house. That was a concern down the road because there is not a lot of monitoring. So I would hope that because it was affordable with a small a, that's what it was sold on. I would hope that the town really works to achieve that. There are plenty of places, other places that people can rent out, I'm sure, that can afford $3,500, $4,000 a month. But if we really want to do what we said we were going to do and provide attainable housing or help people staying in their homes, then we should know what they're being charged for. Otherwise, it's just a business venture. And now we're getting into subsidies. The town can only do so much in terms of record keeping. And I don't know if we want to get in that business of rental properties, because that's what you would be in if you start providing subsidies. So I just think we need to keep a handle on it and make sure it's going to the right people. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Tom Gagan, I saw you put your hand up on this. Did you want to contribute to this point too?
Yes, Arthur, I could. Tom Gagan. To talk to Elaine's point, my issue was that there is proprietary information within these leases, executed leases. I just don't think it's necessary that the public know what that information is. I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't required. What I meant was it wasn't required to be in a public document. I think the town has every right to know that it's a legitimate lease, that it's been executed properly. And I even suggested that there may be some issues where people, as I have done in the past, has actually put these on public notice through the registry of deeds. If you have an important long-term lease, you can do that. So I just don't think that there's information, personal proprietary information that needs to be made available to the public. On Bob Workchafter's point about subsidizing, one of the issues I was going to bring up later in another meeting was that the possibility that we had talked about. Bob Dubus, I think, mentioned this also when we went through various machinations about developers picking up these properties and plopping these ADUs on like they were mushrooms. That there's quite an expense to do this, particularly if it's a separate unit from the main house or the main property. One of the areas that perhaps there may not be this board's preview, but we have CPA funds available, and why, in terms of what the select board wants to do in funding and be supportive of affordable or attainable housing, is why something like an ADU couldn't apply for some funding for a CPA from the CPA funds. And as long as that unit was held as an ADU, those funds were not repayable. Once that unit changed from an ADU under a deed restriction, those funds would have to be paid back to the town through the CPA funding. I mean, there's a lot of creativity that we could talk about on how to make these ADUs more available to the type of individuals that we're trying to address. Small families, working families. Again, to use Bob Dubus's, he's in a business where it's very difficult for him to get appropriate housing anywhere near Chatham for some of his employees. But if there was a funding source, whether it be a bank or the housing fund or CPA funds, I think that we need to kind of look into that as a way of making ADUs a little bit more viable to the general population in town. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I'd like to move on to Carolyn McClellan. I see your hand has been up for a while. I'd like to hear your comments, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, this is Carol McClellan. I'm chair of the Community Housing Partnership. And just some backstory on the ADU. You know, traditionally the ADU had, I believe it was already a bylaw, but it had a capital A requirement and nobody used it. And our mission several years ago was to take that capital A requirement off. And our goal specifically was to create units. In the town, we do have a rental assistance program, and there's a lot of restrictions on that. That has to be for capital A subsidized housing. And the idea that an ADU is being rented for $3,500 to $4,000 a month, and what a capital A rental would be, that gap is huge. There's a whole bunch of people that fall in between that. And we were just hoping that we could develop housing could be added to the housing stock through the ADU process without the town spending money building it. And it would just be people in the community. Here I am, I'm a citizen. I'm not using half my house. I know somebody I like that I could rent to. Maybe I could turn it into a rental. I could make some money and somebody would have be heads in beds. That's what we're looking for. How much money I charge or were to charge somebody, that's not the issue necessarily. It's about trying to create more housing for the broad spectrum of people at every income level who is desperate for year-round housing in this town. There's a ton of people all across the spectrum. Now, this was a way to create as much housing stock as we could. Our issue is housing stock. There just isn't any. Even if we do a rent subsidy program, there aren't any units. And there are very few people who want to go from renting seasonally to renting year round because they use the property. But there are people out there who have a house where they have part of their house that they're not using, and they might consider having a rental. And that's what we were hoping to capture, trying to just create more housing. And it wasn't about tracking how much money people were making. That wasn't our issue. Our issue was heads in beds and creating housing opportunities for our year-round residents. The monitoring system, we hope will do due diligence in making sure it's a year-round rental. That's our issue. Not how much money they're being charged, but is it a year-round rental? That's what we wanted. That was our intent. And I think the town voted overwhelmingly in support of that. And right before you now is just an idea about expanding some of the parameters so it can be utilized by other members in the community that might not be able to use it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'd like to recognize Gloria Freeman. And Gloria, appreciate it if we could focus on the items that are up before on these amendment changes to the ADU bylaw. I appreciate that if you could. Thank you.
Hi, it's Gloria Freeman. I do have a question for Allie. Allie, am I correct that there is no ADU that is operational in Chatham yet? I think you wrote that to me just this week.
That is correct. We do not have an operational ADU yet.
Okay, thank you. So we don't know how this concept of ADUs has worked out. So maybe it's a bit premature to be reviewing this bylaw since we haven't had an ADU. And also I wanted to mention, someone talked about deed restrictions. There are no deed restrictions on ADUs. Am I correct about that, Allie?
That is correct, Gloria. There are no deed restrictions.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I think that, Tom, do you have one last wrap-up comment? I'd really like to go to a vote on this as soon as we can.
I do, Arthur. I just get somewhat incensed when people take comments out of context. The reference, I'm the one that referenced deed restrictions, and it was only in the context that if CPA funds were issued to build an ADU, that there would be a restriction on that ADU, saying that if that ADU ever changed back into private hands, that those funds would have to be by deed restriction, be given back to the town. Nothing as a general comment about ADUs having deed restrictions. So just for clarification, we all need to stay on the same page, please.
Okay, with that, I'd like to look at a possible vote. Ally, is this also a recommended vote for March 7th?
That is correct, Art.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then I'd like to seek a motion for vote to refer the attached protective zoning bylaw amendment to the Board of Selectmen for review to be placed on the May 14th, 2022 annual town meeting warrant and set the required zoning amendment public hearing for the planning board on March 7th, 2022 public hearing meeting. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved, Bob. Bob Werchapter so moves.
And
second, Tom Gagan.
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, I approve.
Okay, Bob Werchapter.
Bob Werchapter, I approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, I approve.
Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan, I approve.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, I approve.
And Art Sprue, I approve also. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution and vote on this. Last agenda item I see is review draft revisions to section 3D, 3H of the protected zoning bylaw, accessory buildings and structures. This has come up before the town several meetings, if I understand this right, Ally, and this is, again, it just keeps getting missed or hung up for some reason, but this is just a simple clarification on what do you do when it's 100 square feet? Am I correct on this?
Yes, that is correct, Art. So this actually went to town meeting, last annual town meeting, but there was no one there to move the motion forward. So we are bringing it back before the board again. There is the article does serve two purposes. The first one is to clarify existing language. So right now, the bylaw addresses storage sheds of over 100 square feet and those that are under 100 square feet, but it doesn't address those that are exactly 100 square feet. So we wanted just to clarify that. And then the second thing is that it would exempt storage sheds of 100 square feet or less from coverage limitations in the bylaw. There are many times that applicants want to put a small storage shed on their property, but because of their coverage, they have to get a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so we think that's a lot to go through just to put a small storage shed on your parcel. So those are the recommendations in the bylaw. The planning board has seen this, I think 3 times now, maybe 2 or 3. And so we're just hoping to bring it forth to town meeting again.
All right, so since this is not new, I would just like to ask if any of the board has any comments on this. Rather than going through a roll call on this, please.
This is Mr. Chairman. This is Bob Dubus. I have a comment.
Go ahead, Bob.
This is like beating a dead horse. I thought this was over and done with 2 years ago. Thank you.
You're right. All right. If there's no comments from the board, see if there's any comments from the public on this. I don't see any hands raised. So let me pull this up again for a minute. And Ally, this would be March 7th again?
That is correct.
Okay, so I'd like to seek motion to vote to refer the attached protective zoning bylaw amendment to the Board of Selectmen for review to be placed on the May 14th, 2022 annual town meeting warrant and set the required zoning amendment public hearing for the planning board's March 7th, 2022 public meeting. Do I have a motion?
Warren Chain, I so move.
Bob Dubus, second.
Warren. Thank you. Roll call vote. Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approved.
Bob Werschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan, approve.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And Art Sprue, I approve also. And as chair, I have no further closing comments for anybody, so I will look for a recommendation for the motion to close the meeting.
Bob Dubus, move to close.
Bob Wirtschafter, seconds.
Thank you. Okay, roll call vote. Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approved.
Bob Werschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
Tom Gagan.
It's a dead horse. I approve.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And Art Sprue, I approve, and note the time at 7:45 p.m. Thank you for allowing me to chair this meeting.